A good entrepreneur is someone who can spot opportunities, who can be creative, who has got energy, who can articulate a vision, someone who can bring others with them, someone who habitually spots new opportunities and does new things to build things of recognised value is one definition that's been used, and that's helpful to me. I think in the sense of church leadership, it's someone who is prophetic in some sense, that they can spot opportunities others might have missed and say, look, I think we should be moving towards this, and then draw down the resources that are needed in order to make that thing happen. But it speaks to me of someone who has hope, who articulates hope, who has energy, who's creative, who can take risks to a degree, and who takes others with them, all for service in the kingdom and for the greater glory of God. When we're thinking about this idea of do entrepreneurship and the gospel mix, I think the thing I want to get away from is this idea of the maverick entrepreneur who has thought about making some money for their own personal gain. That's not what I'm working with at all. I would want to get right away from the entrepreneur as seen as someone who was making money, who was making anything for personal gain. I'm using the term to refer to those who have a focus on the gospel and who realise that in order to be effective in the current missionary situation, we need to be energetic, we need to spot opportunities that might otherwise have been missed, we need to be creative, we need to be collaborative, we need to work together, and all of this infers leadership, but it's leadership plus, if you like, leadership which can spot things that wouldn't necessarily be spotted. Do the gospel and entrepreneurship mix? Of course they do. The gospel is the good news of Jesus Christ, and how do we convey that? Well, we need to be creative, we need to be energetic, we need to move outwards and spot ways in which we can make Jesus known, which might be surprising. So for me, that's the way in which I'm using the term entrepreneur. It's someone who can do that. So of course, in that sense, I think that the gospel and entrepreneurship fit very well together. It's not that they're inevitably seen together. I think that in order to share the gospel faithfully in our current culture, entrepreneurship is really helpful. It's a helpful way of looking at sharing the gospel and at being good news. Often the language of pioneer and the language of entrepreneur are used together. I don't think it's inevitable that all pioneers are entrepreneurs, or that all clergy or ministers working in a more inherited situation are not entrepreneurs. I think what can be said is that those who are labelled pioneers generally exhibit entrepreneurial qualities, that we might tend to see more creativity, but that might be about having the opportunity to exercise that creativity. They might be more willing to take risks, but again, that might be because they've been given permission to take those risks, whereas clergy in more inherited contexts may not have either opportunity or feel that they have permission. And I think so I would want to say that pioneers perhaps get this language of entrepreneurship when it's linked up to ministry. But that's not to say that clergy in working in other situations don't get it. My research here at Durham is with clergy who are not labelled pioneers in a whole range of contexts, and I see huge, a large number of those exhibiting entrepreneurial qualities and making space to have entrepreneurial ministries. And that requires being able to say, I'm not going to do certain things, I'm not going to use my time in certain ways. I know I'm going to get flack for that, but I need to create space to do A, B and C, whatever that is. So not all pioneers are entrepreneurs, but I think more pioneers get that term and just get the language and are happier with the language. Is there a time when the entrepreneur should move on and someone else take their place? I don't think I'd want to be in the business of saying we can make a principle about this. Entrepreneurs generally start things. They tend to be habitual, so they want to start new things. That doesn't mean that entrepreneurs who start things in a particular context can't stay in situ and can't stay where they are and begin new things from where they are, or having begun a community, or been a person who's been part of starting a community, can't see new things happen to that community and see new possibilities with a fresh expression, for example. So I wouldn't want to say that pioneers who are entrepreneurs always, we see them starting new things and then moving on. In some cases that will happen, but I think that entrepreneurial spirit can be brought to bear over a long period of time in one place. And certainly, I'd want to use the language of entrepreneur enablers as well. I want to use that phrase rather. That we would want to see entrepreneurial leaders in the church enabling that in others, so that an entrepreneurial community would be a place where creativity was valued, and that creativity helped those who are part of that community to exercise entrepreneurship in their places of work. I think some people in the church have a problem with the language of entrepreneurship. They say it smacks of business and the corporate world. And I get that, and programs like Dragon's Den or The Apprentice certainly have helped to manufacture that kind of image, or Del Boy in Only Fools and Horses, for example. I want to get right away from that and say that the language, the use of the term entrepreneur and the language around entrepreneurship can be really helpful, because the qualities that we'd want to associate with that, about being creative, about risk-taking, about drawing others together, about being habitual, about innovating, about spotting advantages and going for them, that kind of stuff is just really helpful at the moment, given the current missionary situation we're in, and given the need to rethink large parts of our received understanding of church and mission and evangelism and the way those things work together. So I would want to say, actually, I'm not trying to shoehorn this language into the church, but I think it can help us. I think it's useful. And I'd also want to just throw a challenge back to the church, say we've got no problem using bureaucratic language, or other language drawn from other parts of the business world, or from organisational terms. We have the church commissioners, for example. We have ministry division. We don't have a problem with using these kind of terms. We see that they're valuable. We also know that they're loaded, but we see that they're valuable. And I think it's the same with entrepreneurship. I think it's got great value at the present time.